You're listening to 88.7 WLUW Chicago Sound Alliance, broadcasting from the campus of Loyola University. It's live from the Heartland, featuring Katy, Hogan, Michael James, and Thom Clark. Today's guests on the show are Christian Diaz from the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, author Russ Bradburd, and poet Connie Voisine. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
And good morning, and welcome back to Live from the Heartland. It is Saturday morning. It is a beautiful day in Chicago. Get out and enjoy. It might become cloudy. There might be rain tomorrow. But as the monsoon season maybe wears down in Chicago, hopefully we'll start a summer. Good morning, Michael and Thomas.
Good morning, Katy.
Hey, good morning, Katy, Hogan.
How we doing?
All right.
We're doing good.
Very good. That was a song from Putumayo, but since Jake chose something else, I'm not sure if it was what it was. But we'll find out. Anyway, Putumayo, great music. And we've got great guests, as Jake said. What we're going to do is talk a little bit about what's going on in the world. We have border arrests to our southern border surging to a 7-year high as Mexico tries to head off tariffs with, what's his face?
Apparently they did.
Apparently they did. Again, as Thom likes to put it, it's a bait and switch kind of talk this up, make these threats, beat one's chest like the gorilla.
Government by tweet storm.
Bingo. And then all,
Good use of technology.
much ado about nothing, frankly. And he also gets messages from people after he says these things that say, "What are you talking about?" And he somehow, he escapes it.
Well, I wonder if the sudden settlement with Mexico had anything to do with the GOP saying we're going to be against this, and we have enough votes to veto your imposition of any Mexican tariffs. I mean, it's
Well, what a moment for the Republicans to actually say that.
well, they maybe developed half a spine this week. I don't know.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the Health and Human Services has canceled English classes. What else? Oh, soccer. Oh, yeah. Bill Maher did a great thing about it. He goes, "How much does a soccer ball cost?" He did that last night. But
So somehow we don't have enough money for that, but we can sell jets to Saudi Arabia and stir up another war there. But we can't teach kids on the border whose parents aren't around because they've been separated at the border. But lucky for them, they may get new lodging at Fort Benning.
Oh, isn't that the place where they had the School of the Americas? They would train all these Latin American dudes to assassinate
Their own
protesters in their own countries.
Oh, you've got a good memory there. In fact, one colleague shared that even this past year, 80-some other Honduran police were trained at this same facility, which, of course, is one of the sources of the flow of migrants, refugees, whatever label we're using at the moment, from those Central American countries up to Mexico. Talk about a circular story here.
no kidding, man. No kidding.
Mind-blowing. It just makes my head explode.
Indeed. And we just have to acknowledge that our former colonist holders, Great Britain, showed a great deal of class this week, doing what they are expected to do, which is welcome their strong partner in everything for a visit. And, of course...
Unfortunately, we sent Trump instead.
Exactly.
He just embarrassed many times, once again.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Even on the graves of our dearly departed from D-Day, he had to go off on Nancy
Incredible.
Pelosi and other things. He is a boy. He's a boy bully that loves tweet storms.
That's disrespectful to boys.
It is. I'm sorry.
So-
I take that back.
Yeah, and no, he's an ignoramus. To do that, it's just too much. Too much.
We thought we'd do a quick farm report in this time of spring, if it's indeed spring. Some very alarming statistics. Less than half of Illinois corn seed has been actually planted so far. That's down 59% from the average over the past 5 years. If farmers did get their seeds in because there were occasional dry spells the last couple of months, only a third have emerged, meaning another 59% drop in the amount. Along with timely tariffs, prepare for soaring prices and food shortages. I will say that our backyard beans have not been planted yet because we're afraid of seed rot. But the ducks are doing fine.
Oh, that's important, those ducks. I'm waiting for a duck egg, Tom.
Well, now that I'm back at Gethsemane for the summer, I hear a lot about seeds and planting, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just, I think that we need to do a slightly deeper dive, America, into what our agriculture is based on. And if we have that many fewer corn seeds being planted, some would say that's not a bad thing, given that crop and what it's going to. So we need to learn about our food sources, people, because, you need food to live. Okay.
And the census is coming up, and as many of you know, the administration has been in collusion to suppress the census count by using a citizenship question, which many people think will diminish the number of people who participate. A lower court ruled in favor of not having the citizenship question on the
Census.
the ballot of the census. But it still will go to the Supreme Court, it looks like. So we're watching that with bated breath.
We want to acknowledge that 100 years ago, women got the vote, finally. And it's just a very important thing that kind of got a little bit lost in the press of other news this week.
But we're hoping a lot of women turn out to vote the next time.
And that the white women make up for last time.
Yeah.
My sister girls, come on.
Yeah, last time
Jeez.
wasn't good.
We want to acknowledge with the late session that went into our show last week that JB got a lot of his agenda passed. It was probably the most productive General Assembly in years, not just the last 4 years, but in years.
Most ambitious and consequential General Assembly in years. Yes.
Income tax reform was passed and will be on the 2020 ballot. Much expanded reproduction rights were approved. A $40 billion budget that is claimed to be balanced. Huge infrastructure spending is in the works, pleasing contractors at least, and probably some other workers.
And maybe some people who want to drive safely over bridges.
And missed in the discussion about property tax reform, our own county assessor, Fritz Katy, got a significant, albeit administrative change. Seniors will no longer have to go in every year to get their senior exemption. It will be automatic.
Yeah, that's the senior homeowners exemption, homestead exemption. And that was... You're right. It's a simple fix. Should have been done years ago, and it's going to relieve a lot of us of a little bit of a headache every year.
On the other hand, this is all coming with a huge, huge expansion in gambling, whether it's casinos that you like or don't like, or blackjack, or video gambling in more places than just the bars you might have seen in the
I'm so sad
neighborhood.
about this.
I think this is a terrible way to fund any kind of government.
Yep.
It encourages all sorts of other social issues that we have not come to grips with, and I'm very disturbed, particularly amongst addicted gamblers and other people of lower income who really can't afford to do this. Not that it's for me to say what people do with their money, but the state-sanctioned gambling, to me, is a danger. We're going to have more gambling positions than Las Vegas. And that just...
That's ridiculous.
I think it's a terrible way to fund government when, in fact, we're not a southern state with no revenue coming in. We're a pretty rich state, and we just haven't
It's a
been able
sad
to...
day for Chicago and the state. It really is, that gambling thing.
Please don't
Please
hit the
read
table.
Please read ProPublica that analyzed the whole gambling bill. There's many implications that most people didn't hear about in the reporting.
As for things going on, there's a beach cleanup happening, I think, as we speak, at the community sculpture at Lunch Beach. Is that right? Is
It's
it
actually
today?
tomorrow.
Oh, it's tomorrow. Sorry.
And the sculpture will take place in July. This is another activity of the P.O. Box Collective, but it's a great way to help our lakefront by getting a pretty mass cleanup going on basically all day tomorrow.
And it's getting ready for the Artists of the Wall Festival, which is next weekend. And we'll be happy to tell you more about that next weekend.
Our dear friend Lucy Smith will be performing at Midsummer Fest also tomorrow in Andersonville at 5 p.m. They have their whole Midsummer Fest beginning to take place this weekend there. And Mary Lane, a former guest, has a documentary screening at the Chicago History Museum on Tuesday.
We forgot to mention that about more than 200 people showed up 2 nights in a row here in Loyola Park, in Rogers Park, to first talk about the future with our new alderwoman and what we want and don't want to see happen. The second one was about twice as many people to talk about the future of the Heartland Cafe site, something near and dear to our hearts. We'll talk more about that later in detail, but it's on Block Club and some of the sites that cover local stuff in Rogers Park. Neighbors were not altogether pleased with what was being presented. It's a very large building for a very small footprint, and a lot of the details that are more important to Rogers Parkers, like affordable, accessible, etc., were not satisfactorily met according to the post-discussion.
You have an opportunity to comment directly on this proposal. Go to Alderman Haddon's site where there is, it's all set up for you to comment. They want comments by the middle of next week.
That's right. And that's Maria Haddon, 49th Ward. This is Blues Fest weekend. We're missing and thinking about our friend Lynn Orman, who normally ties one on big time this weekend. So we're thinking of her, loving her, and hope to talk to her soon. But anyway, Chicago, go and enjoy your homegrown music at Millennium Park and attendant stages.
David Orr is having a panel on
yeah.
Thursday. Mm-hmm. Katie, what do you know about this one?
It's David's good government project, and because I like David and because he's one of the smarter people that still, even out of office, is working for you and I think this is a great thing. It's talking about our future, the future of progressive ideas in the new city of Chicago. He'll have an aldermanic panel, and he will be moderating. That's David at Truman College, Thursday. Doors open 6:30. Program starts 7. It's over by 8:30. And good conversation. Let's design our future together, folks.
And we are already into June. Next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, Artists of the Wall, all sorts of community activity, painting, food, music. Please join us. It's one of our better events on the lakefront all summer, and it's a great way to kick off the season.
You're listening to Live from the Heartland, WLUW Chicago 88.7 FM and WLUW.org. We'll be right back with Christian Diaz.
Welcome back. That's a little bit of Dr. John, who unfortunately passed this week, a wonderful New Orleans pianist and
I did not know.
And that's why we did this music.
Dang, hombre, I did not know.
I want to welcome to the
rest in
Live from the
peace.
Heartland microphone, Christian Diaz, who's the lead housing organizer for the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. We've been wanting to have a conversation about affordable housing for a while, particularly given the new mayor coming in. But you folks have a big victory to talk about. How did you get a 100% affordable mid-rise, if I can call it that, 5 or 6 story building smack dab in the middle of Logan Square?
Well, it took a long time, right? And it took a fight with the city. I think the conversation at the city level has changed in the last 5 years. I think affordable housing was a lot more controversial 5 years ago, before we saw this wave of gentrification hit neighborhoods like Logan Square, but also other parts of the city where people are realizing that it's becoming too expensive for regular folks to live here.
Right.
So what's that going to do to our culture? I think people are recognizing that the city's changing too fast, not for the better, changing in a way that's only benefiting wealthy folks, developers, investors, bankers, but where families like mine or like ours, working class families, are being left behind. Mm-hmm. And so for Logan Square, I think having seen so many, mid-rises pop up that are luxury developments, I think created the conditions where people were relieved when we heard that finally we're getting an affordable mid-rise in Logan Square. But, in 2014, the Metropolitan Planning Council, in 2014, the Metropolitan Planning Council launched a process because in Logan Square, we had a parking lot right in the heart of our neighborhood that was owned by the city. And so it being public land, the Metropolitan Planning Council wanted to do a process with the city to decide what we would do with this public land. People advocated for 100% affordable housing, and so that's what we fought for. I mean, at some point...
That's outstanding.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
how completely rare. I mean, has it ever been done? What a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
So keep going, Christian. I just...
No, absolutely. At some point, the mayor wanted to build a Target, in this parking lot.
Doesn't everybody? Jeez.
Oh,
Why does
another
everybody
Target.
Why does everybody want a Target?
I don't know,
and
man.
and on the north side, we have enough Targets on the north
I
side.
think it's a
okay?
Starbucks factor.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
right.
But so Logan Square Neighborhood Association, we've been around for 57 years. We work with parents, with high school students, with clergy. We bring together churches, block clubs, social service agencies, and together we organize to build a better neighborhood for all of us, right? And so when one of the parents from the school saw a flyer on the street saying that these meetings had been scheduled to decide the future of this publicly owned parking lot, she came to us and said, hey, why aren't these flyers in Spanish? Why aren't they bilingual? Why don't we know about this?
Que onda, hombre?
Right? So we got to work. We brought our parents, our youth out to these meetings. We advocated for 100% affordable housing. And then this was with Alderman Ray Colon, who lost his election in 2015 to the first socialist alderman in the city of Chicago, who's Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa. And so Rosa, from the beginning, was extremely supportive of building 100 units of affordable housing at this parking lot. But we also know that in order to get something of that size built, you need the mayor's support, right? And you can imagine what the relationship between Alderman Rosa and the mayor and Mayor Rahm Emanuel
You're
was
laughing.
like.
Can you give us any examples of what that relationship was like?
Well, one example, Alderman Ramirez Rosa was the only person to vote. Wait, didn't he initiate the process to challenge the $95 million police academy?
I think you might have, yes.
Yeah. So instances like that, right? But ultimately, in 2019 is approaching, right, with the mayoral election. At the time, we thought Rahm Emanuel wanted to run for a third term. At Logan Square Neighborhood Association, we figured after the tragedy of Laquan McDonald being shot 16 times that the black community was not going to vote for Rahm Emanuel, right? And so we figured if in order for Rahm to win, he needs the white vote and the Latinx vote. And here we are, a community-based organization that mobilizes Latino people. So we wanted to tell the story of how Rahm Emanuel's policies have hurt Latino people, and in that way have some power over Rahm, right? Because he would be afraid that we would tell this story about how he's hurt Latinos in Logan Square. And so we planned this huge march. We wanted to bring 600 people to Logan Square on October 23rd. We were going to call it the March for Racial Equity. And then Rahm announces he's not running for mayor anymore. And
I
we're
guess
like,
you scared him. I still
wish
think
I
we
could
need a
take
march
credit
for
for that.
racial equity, though. I like the idea
well,
of a
we
march.
went through with it.
Oh.
We just had to change our strategy, right? Before it was about Rahm. Now it was about showing whoever was going to become mayor that the moment for affordability in Logan Square is now, right? And I think we were very successful with that. We had 600 people march from the former Mega Mall site, which is now the Logan's Crossing, which is going to be a Target, and 200 or so units of luxury housing. I mean, I'm talking about studios that go for $1,800 a month. Like,
Sure.
who can even afford this?
Who
right?
wants a studio for $1,800?
I
a
know.
month?
Like, I would easily go for a 3-bedroom for the same amount, right?
Yeah,
Like,
there you go.
in a nice
Exactly.
in a nice residential neighborhood.
I think a march for racial equity is due in many neighborhoods of Chicago.
I
I would
think-
like to
March.
see. I would like to see the unity that is kind of spreading around the progressive aldermen and alderwomen that we all just elected.
Absolutely.
That would be so sweet.
I mean, it worked great for Logan Square, right? Because we marched for racial equity. We marched about winning a mental health clinic
Yeah.
in Logan Square after Rahm Emanuel had shut ours down.
Right.
And we won. There was
Dang.
a public referendum, and it's a binding referendum. So we increased in Logan Square, Avondale, and Hermosa our property taxes by like $4 a year. But all those extra funds are earmarked for a mental health clinic, a public mental health clinic.
Yeah,
for
it's
those
too
three
bad we have to
neighborhoods.
raise taxes, which should be paying for it already.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Let's go back a little bit because when I got first involved with affordable housing in Uptown and later citywide, Logan Square was one of those spots that was already worried about gentrification. So I'm going back 40 years, and there was a tussle even then between homeowners fixing up rundown two flats and wanting their investment to be good, as well as people trying to do, particularly along the boulevards, fix up apartment buildings that were affordable. So that struggle has been there, as it has been in Uptown and other places for so long. How does this 100-unit development change that dynamic for Logan Square?
I think the conversation around affordability has changed substantially because of this movement to win these 100 units. And I say that because prior to the public meeting that took place on April 23rd, where 500 residents came out and the majority of those voted to approve these 100 units of affordable housing, I feel like before that meeting had happened, the questions around gentrification revolved around our individual actions rather than public policy. And so I feel like when those conflicts come up of homeowners saying, well, what's so wrong with gentrification? My property value has gone up. Now I can sell my property and go retire in Puerto Rico, right? With the $1 million I just got for my property.
That's what some would say. Yes.
Yeah. So, we would say that's great. That's totally your right to do that. Our problem isn't with individual homeowners and the decisions they make, or with individual investors or bankers or developers. Our problem is with the city of Chicago, which has a set of policies, tax codes, zoning laws that prioritize luxury development at any cost. I mean, for Logan Square, right, we have a TIF in Logan Square, and we've seen so much of this public TIF dollars that should be going to our schools, should be going to our parks, should be going to our clinics, instead being funneled into luxury developments.
Which means into the pockets of developers.
Absolutely. Why are we as a city subsidizing the wealth of these private
Of
developers?
already wealthy people.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And so I think the victory for Logan Square was not just the 100 units of affordable housing, although that's extremely important, but the real victory was the narrative change, that the problem of gentrification isn't a problem of individuals being messed up. The problem is our social policy, our public policy in Chicago being messed up. And so that to me is a big victory.
Well said, Kristen Diaz. How do you, how has the expansion of this conversation in Logan Square affected the housing market there? Is it on all levels, running on all cylinders?
Well, I will say Logan Square has seen some of the highest rent increases in the city of Chicago. I think the average maybe 4 or 5 years ago was about $1,100 a month, and now it's stabilized, quote unquote, at $1,450, which is still it's just too high for people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that's really important to note about Logan Square is that when we're talking about affordable housing, we're not necessarily referring to Section 8 or CHA or public housing. The real affordable housing in our community are those that are provided by families like mine. So, for example, my parents bought a 3-flat in Logan Square in the 90s for $110,000. What does that mean for them?
Yeah.
Is that we grew up on the 3rd unit, right, on the top floor, and my two families from back in Mexico that are so close and dear to us live on the 1st floor and the garden unit. Do you want to guess how much they're paying in rent today in Logan Square?
Tell us.
$650.
Yeah. Oh my God. Did I tell you that already?
Family relationships
Yeah, $650.
Yeah.
That's unheard of. We're
for
talking
a $1,500 apartment,
for
easy, right?
For a 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
$650 in Logan Square. The only reason that kind of affordable unit exists is because we have families like mine, mom and pops, who own 3 flats and 2 flats.
Yeah.
But the other thing to note about Logan Square is that in 2017, we had the highest rate of demolitions in the city of Chicago. I think it was 190 demolitions, something
Wow.
like that. You know
Which
what
is
kinds
interesting
of
because that used to be the case on the South Side. When Richie was mayor, he did a major demolition spree through the South Side. Now, some of those were asked for by the neighbors, problem buildings, et cetera, but neighbors didn't really know what they were stepping into when giving Richie the wrecking ball really just wiped out entire neighborhoods on the South
But
Side.
this is to
Wow.
upscale. This
And-
isn't just a vacant lot development. It's,
Right. It's a whole nother thing, but it's still taking down possibly still good
So
business.
talk about your demolition tax fee that you were talking about along with
Yeah.
the community land trust.
Okay, so the 3 flats and the 2 flats, right? Those are classic Chicago buildings. And those types of buildings represent access for low-income families and people of color to access the middle class, right? Because you buy a 2-flat or a 3-flat and you're able to pay the mortgage by renting some of those units out, often to families at affordable rates. So for Logan Square, if we are serious about preserving affordability, it's nice to create 100 units of affordable housing, but we're talking about a neighborhood that's lost 19,000 Latinx people in the last 15 years. So 100 units is really a drop in the bucket. The real strategy in our view at LSNA is the preservation of naturally affordable housing, including those 2-flats and 3-flats. So we believe that when a developer tears down a 3-flat or a 2-flat or converts it to a single-family home, they should pay a demolition fee, a meaningful one. We're talking about at least $50,000, right? And then that money should be spent on buying properties, those 2-flats and 3-flats, before developers scoop them up, tear them down, flip them, and then we want to preserve them, make them sustainable, make them passive housing with state grants, and then sell them without that profit motive to low-income families. So we're talking about a demolition fee that will fund an affordable home ownership program on the northwest side of Chicago.
How creative is that?
Christian, you're from the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, but I imagine there are a lot of other organizations and groups around the city who are concerned with housing and beyond. I wonder what kind of, as an organizer, what kind of network has been built around this that will not only work on housing but other issues in the city as we go forward?
Well, gentrification is not a new problem, and a lot of neighborhoods are starting to see what was happening in Logan Square happen in their neighborhood now. And so I think folks have a lot to learn from our work, and there are a lot of mistakes that we've made, right? One example, back in the day, we advocated for the 606, for example, the Bloomingdale Trail, because we wanted more green space for our children in our community. And we fought so hard to get this elevated park in our community, and yet this park, being a public amenity, a really meaningful public investment, actually triggered more displacement. And so when I talked about those demolitions happening, those 2-flats and 3-flats being demolished, most of those are happening in proximity to the 606 because people want to buy those properties, tear them down, replace them with luxury housing, and, folks,
clean up.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the language people use, right? It's like, we want progress. Like, what are you saying? That if white people aren't coming into our neighborhood, then our neighborhood's not improving?
Thank you.
Why is the only solution to any problem in this city? It seems like for a long time, the solution has only been, how do we attract more wealthy white people to a neighborhood? And
Or
that's
a
how
target.
you solve. Yeah, or a target. You attract them with a target, right?
I love the story, Christian Diaz, of the real victory being a narrative change. Really well said. And unfortunately, we can't have to say goodbye and thank you.
Wow, that was fast.
I know. That's
I
how
talk a
quickly
lot.
20 minutes goes. And we want to have you back.
No, please invite me back
Regularly.
anytime. I'd love to bring some leaders with me from LSNA.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yes, thank you
we
so
will
much.
absolutely do that.
And per Christian's suggestion, we're going to hear a little bit from Rosalia, who's currently hitting the charts, a Spanish singer. And take it away. You're listening to Live from the Heartland on WLUW 88.7 FM. Please like us on Facebook.
Hey, we're back. We're back with more Live from the Heartland. This is Michael James with Katy, Hogan, and Thom Clark. We're here every Saturday morning at 26 East Pearson, and you can get us at WLUW.org. Anywhere in the world, anytime. That was Haute Culture, or how do you pronounce that, you guys?
Haute Culture.
Haute Culture.
No.
And Rosalia. And that was a nice tune. So now we're real honored to bring a couple of our pals who are in town for the summer, as they are every summer. They're out of Las Cruces, New Mexico these days. That would be Connie Voisine, the famed poet, and her husband, Russ Bradburd, the author and former basketball coach. Good morning to the two of you.
Good morning.
Yes, I agree.
Well, given that we've got two very talented people, each in their own right, we're going to first, I think, talk to Connie, because Connie, you just got a book published. I know it's not your first, but it's called The Bower. What's it on? What's it about?
Well, Katy, you were there when I was writing it in Belfast, Northern Ireland. So,
What a thrill it was to
what
both.
did you think about Belfast? Is my question.
Oh, you're going to interview me now. Huh?
Yeah, I'm going to interview you.
See, I knew Connie is a spry gal.
trickster.
You gotta keep an eye on Connie. Thanks to you two being there, I was able to visit, and I'm very I will always be grateful for those 3 or however many days we had together, because Belfast is an incredible city. And at the time, I wrote and said, this is a city who likes itself. It felt like that, and celebratory, even with the fact that, Russ just swooped me up and we did like prison visits is what we were doing tourist-wise, which was great because on my own, after going down to Dublin, I visited the prison in Dublin as well. Anyway, you're writing this book. Back to you.
Okay.
How did the book idea evolve for you?
Well, I was living in Belfast for the year, and I had lived there before for 6 months, so I wanted to... anyway, the time I was living there was at the time people started talking about Brexit.
Right.
Which did not pass in Northern Ireland, and at the same time, Trump's campaign was ramping up, and it seemed like it was impossible that he could win, and it seemed like it was impossible that Brexit could happen. So at that time, you knew something was
afoot.
I didn't think it would end up exactly the way it did on both counts. But so I felt like I was watching some kind of tide changing in people's politics. But at the same time, I was watching it from a place that had suffered a lot of sectarian conflict in its history. And so in some ways, the book is about sort of how to integrate, how do you integrate history into poetry, which is hard.
Yes.
It's a little harder, or to make it more obvious.
I neglected to mention this is a book-length poem.
Right.
Yes.
And
kind of like the Iliad.
Well, yeah, exactly like the Iliad. But so I just, for myself, I couldn't break it. The reason why it's book length is because it was sort of an ongoing conversation as I experienced it, and I didn't have in the end, a final take on it. But I wanted to present the thinking and feeling about politics as they were happening, and the way history, especially the history that as I was experiencing it, as someone new to Belfast.
Yeah.
Like I'm an outsider to that culture. But so I was trying to integrate those as I went along and present my thinking rather than any final product.
Yeah.
As my colleagues know, I traveled to Ireland last fall, and the history of the country just gripped me by the ass. And my daughter and her son are going to Derry this summer, and they've had to plot where the troubles aren't happening right now because stuff is coming up again because of Brexit. So I think what you may have captured in this feature-length, book-length poem is going to be of great interest to many of us as we look at what's happening there over the next few months.
Right.
Because Brexit isn't resolved. And we heard even from cabbies in Dublin, the troubles are just below the surface, the memories of them. People are still trying to resolve even what Good Friday supposedly fixed. So I'm looking forward. What's been the reaction to the book?
So far, so good. It's not been out that long in poetry book time, and
that by itself is a topic. Poetry book time,
right? But it's been good, and it's been interesting for me as a project to write something that sort of long and to, I don't know, it's been, because I feel like it's sort of essayistic at times. I think it's poetic at times. I think it was trying to get at a lot of, so for me, formally, it was an experiment. But, recently, Lyra McKee, the young journalist, was killed in Derry. I mean, it's not, it's, things are, I don't know. Brexit is not good news for
Connie,
Northern
your
Ireland.
new book is published by the University of Chicago Press.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering how you chose that press.
Oh, you don't get to choose in the poetry world. You just take what you get. But I got very good. I got very lucky with University of Chicago Press. They've been wonderful to me. They've published this is the third book, and I'm eternally grateful to a university like University of Chicago spending money on supporting poetry in our culture.
So Connie Voisine, poet, author, is such a grasping capitalist. She didn't even bring a copy of her book that we can show you on our videotape. But I am feeling emotional about this book just hearing you talk about it, and I'm thrilled for you and for all of us that you're doing the work you do.
And tell us what the title of it is and what it means.
Well, it's called The Bower, and it is refers to a folk song, which is, I said it was an Irish ballad, but then the fact checkers at University of Chicago said it was a Scottish ballad.
Oh, you can't do that.
But the lines are blurred, and
For you, maybe.
but a bower in especially in the Romantic period of poetry was used often. It's sort of a temporary structure built in the wild for your beloved.
That's right.
And so what I thought of is in this one ballad called A Wild Mountain Time, the speaker in that ballad makes a bower for his beloved, but then at the end of the ballad says, if she won't come, I'll just go find someone else to love, and put that person in the bower, which is kind of a disposable idea about love, but
it's the old Crosby, Stills, and Nash, love the one you're with.
It's coming back.
But I thought of it as a metaphor for childhood too, that we as parents build these temporary structures to protect our beloveds, and then they do move on, right? And so that it became one of the metaphors for being a parent of a young child. So
How good.
How was your bower where you all lived there in Northern Ireland?
Oh, we loved it. We had a wonderful time.
Yep.
We did, and it was a temporary
A lovely
experience.
bower.
But yes,
I'm gonna shift us just a little bit as we move towards asking that handsome guy next to you to also join the conversation. You guys live in Las Cruces. You have had some upfront and personal experience with what's going on in the border, how it affects your community. Can you share with us what you and your neighbors have been engaged with and have been basically pushed to do as a result of the crisis on the border?
well, about, I would say a few weeks ago, I started depositing about 400 migrants a day into our community because El Paso was full. The resources in El Paso were stretched beyond belief. And Annunciation House, which has long been advocates for people crossing the border and supporting migrants, was just, they had opened a new building. They were run over. They couldn't handle it. So I started dropping people off in other communities. So we're 36 miles up the road. So we ended up getting about 400 a day. And what happens is people have been processed.
400 a day.
I know, and this is a community of 80,000, so it's not. I know it has a high impact.
Crazy.
And so these are people who've made it across the border. Their asylum applications have been accepted, and so they've been released from detention. And without shoelaces, without the belt, without the hair ties, even, and they show up 400 a day in Las Cruces, a small town that the homeless shelter maybe handles 80. So what do? Everyone in the community has been fabulous. A coalition of churches has started to do these food drives, clothing drives. The city actually ended up pulling about $500,000 out of its own budget, which is a small city. The city council got all behind it and said, we're going to support this. And so they turned the armory into a temporary shelter and did what they needed to do. And when I volunteered, it was very moving to see the firefighters on, when they weren't on duty, they were there organizing people and making sure things happened. They were wonderful.
That's the America I love.
Yes.
That and the people who were just arrested for giving water to.
Is there no
Yeah, I know.
pushback from anyone in the town on this? Is there not a conservative element of people that side with the Drumpf guy or the Texas governor next door?
I don't know. It seems to me I haven't witnessed a whole lot of it.
Good.
I feel that once you're faced with people who are suffering, which
Some things disappear.
you're just I can
Things
feed
that-
this person.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. Wow.
I want to bring Russ into this conversation
Yeah,
by
and I-
asking.
Wake up, Russ.
And I want to remind people of the book that we just talked about is called The Bower, a poem, and it's just got published in the New Yorker again.
A little while ago, yeah.
okay.
But yes, I did.
How many times you been in the New Yorker,
Just
Connie?
twice.
Well, that's good.
Calm
That's
down, Mike.
just- There'll be more.
All right. So yes, please, Russ. Hello. Good morning, Russ.
Hi, Katy. Hi, Tom. Hi, Michael.
Are you you guys doing this half year in New Mexico, half year in Chicago? I think you have the best of all worlds.
We do. It's not quite half a year, but we're here for the summer
Right.
summer break. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then back to New Mexico State in the fall.
So do you, unlike Chicagoans, use every minute of summer? Like, will you go to Blues Fest this weekend?
Well, I'm going to miss Rib Festival. I'm sad to say, but we try to do as much as we can. Yeah, we're on the bikes, on the train down. We've already been to the Art Institute this summer, so we're trying to make. We're trying not to sit at home. We have no internet or television at home.
Yeah, but you've also been making some appearances along with Sean Harrington off of your book, All the Dreams We've Dreamed. Why don't you tell the listeners who don't know about it briefly what the book's about?
Well, thank you, Michael. All the Dreams We've Dreamed is a sort of a story of gun violence in the world of basketball on Chicago's West Side. So I think many of your listeners would remember the movie Hoop Dreams. The book is centered on the same high school, Marshall High School, but also the tragic accidental mistaken identity shooting of Sean Harrington, the former Marshall player and coach at Marshall, and the struggles that he's gone through since after Sean Harrington saved his daughter in a mistaken identity shooting. He was paralyzed, and since that time, 6 of his players from Marshall were murdered. So it's not the happiest book. It's with the Chicago Review Press. Almost as prestigious as the University of Chicago Press, where Connie's
We think
published.
so.
But we both have local publishers, and I think we did it deliberately. But anyway, Sean's struggles have continued, and we've done a couple book events, one at the University of Chicago's Seminary Co-op, and then at North Central College, which is sort of an interesting place
yeah.
in
Yeah.
Naperville.
Besides doing the book, you might be working on another book. Do you want to give us any hints?
Well,
He never does that.
Bob Dylan said you should never talk about a project while you're still working on it, so I will. But I'm trying to write a comic novel about a football team that takes over an entire university. That has not happened quite at Loyola the way I thought it might. That basketball would take over the entire university, and maybe rightly so. Maybe Porter Moser should be the school president, but I do think So I'm working on a comic novel, and then do some little side journalism gigs.
It's about time.
Yes.
Lighten up.
Yes,
Russ.
something
Lighten up.
Well,
we need
another thing that you're involved with, and you have thankfully dragged me into for now close to 20 years, is the basketball in the barrio. You and I first met probably at the Heartland through our buddy Rudnick, or however it happened, and you ended up writing for the Heartland Journal. But you then hipped me to this program that you do every year in the Segundo Barrio in El Paso, which is probably a good example of a program that could be replicated other places. Why don't you tell folks about what's been going on with that and what do you got planned for this year?
Well, basketball in the barrio might be in its 27th year. It just depends on how you define it. We've only been charging $1 for I think for 23 years, something like that. Before that, we used to charge $20, I think, for the basketball camp. But we bring in 100. There's 100 6 to 10-year-old boys and girls. They pay $1. And they get a free basketball and T-shirt and harmonica this year.
Sometimes shoes. One year we got shoes.
Yes, that's right. Well, we've tried to get away from the swag, and every kid gets a bilingual children's book, and sometimes they get 2 bilingual.
And a Lester
children's books.
Doré poster of some
That's right.
sports person.
If you can get a hold of him this year, he's hard to get a hold of. And so we've been doing it for a long time. And we use basketball as a lure and then sort of indoctrinate the kids with art and music and storytellers. And so it's maybe a third basketball and the rest of it's educational. And yeah, so we've been doing it for a long time, and we get, we don't make any money, but it's an important event, and I tell people I've gotten rich. It sounds corny, but I've gotten rich in other ways from doing it.
So are the Warriors not so golden anymore?
Well,
And why are we still doing playoffs in June?
I'm
Really?
conflicted, Tom, because I like Steve Kerr because I know he reads books, and
Which is
good
a plus.
politics.
and they have maybe
He's-
maybe the biggest lefty assistant coach in the world in Ron Adams,
Yeah,
who's a
yeah,
deep
yeah.
thinker, and I'm actually have an email relationship with Ron Adams, but. And Al McKinney is on the team. Alphonse McKinney is a Marshall High School guy that played for Sean Harrington at Marshall. So on that, I do like Golden State. And then the Toronto Raptors have Pascal Siakam, who's a former New Mexico State player from Cameroon. Maybe the most.
Was he there when you were coaching?
Oh yeah. Well, no, not when I was coaching, but I'm the TV analyst for a few home games.
So you're close to it.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but then and also Nick Nurse has been Nick Nurse used to coach in England, and so I've known Nick Nurse through email also because when I was coaching in Ireland, he was coaching in England, and he read my book about coaching basketball in Ireland, and he's been great to Sean Harrington. He's brought Sean Harrington to a couple games and seems deeply concerned about social justice issues, and he's a big reader himself. You can tell because he's got those big glasses on. He must be a reader. But so I'm conflicted because I like both, and I would sort of like the new team to win, and then last night I was thinking, oh no, now Golden State's going to lose, and so I started switching my allegiance. Yeah, right in the middle of the game. But I'm happy.
I do that all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Russ,
Whoever's losing,
you
they
mentioned
get
all
me.
these progressive dudes that are in basketball and the NBA. I'm wondering if you could make a comment on the NBA versus the NFL, National Football League, because it seems like even the owners in the NBA are much hipper to the social issues that face us, and certainly the basketball players, are a little bit more outspoken.
I think that's right. I think it goes back. David Stern was a complicated guy, but he did a lot of good things.
Yeah.
And I think Adam Silver's doing a lot of good things. And then you have the real forces in NBA coaching in the last couple decades have been Phil Jackson, who I don't have to tell you.
He also
listeners
reads
about.
books, I understand.
Yes, I've heard that too. And his son's a poet. Ben Jackson's a pretty good poet, right, Connie?
Yes.
Yes. And then Popovich from
Yeah,
San
he's one of our
Antonio.
favorites.
And then Steve Kerr, whose own father was a victim of gun violence, but was a very progressive guy at the American University in Beirut.
That's right.
And
That's
with
right.
and with Nick Nurse now, but there's a long history of the NBA doing pretty good on social justice issues.
So is the work you've done with basketball in the barrio such that basketball could be a part of the solution to our ongoing epidemic of violence here in the city?
Well, I have complicated feelings about it, Tom, because, like, for example, at Marshall High School, which is down to 200 kids now or 300 kids, but
Right.
because of all the charter schools. But if you've got if 20 kids play basketball in the school, 20 boys or maybe 25 boys and 25 girls, it's just not every kid. And so, yeah, I do think basketball can be helpful. And sports has always been at the forefront of social justice, particularly racial justice, and particularly in Chicago. If you go back to Loyola's 1963 team, which had 4 black stars, but I think that sports can be part of the solution. But I think we have to come up with more than. Not every kid can play basketball. Not every kid's going to get a scholarship to get out of the West Side and that kind of thing. And even the idea that you've got to get out of somewhere is a terrible idea.
Yes, exactly.
So I think my feelings are complicated, Tom. It's not quite as simple that I don't think basketball is really the answer, but maybe it can be a tool. It's always been a great equalizer in terms of, not totally equalizer, but sports is one of the few places where race mattered a lot less than other places.
Russ Bradburd, author of All the Dreams We've Dreamed. We're going to switch back to Connie Voisine, the poet and lady who mothered the beautiful daughter, Alma, with you. Can you read us a poem as we end our show today on Live from the Heartland?
Mm-hmm. I would love to. This poem is called Dangerous for Girls. To remind our viewers under the age of 40 that Chandra Levy was an intern for a senator and ended up murdered, and so this refers to her. Dangerous for Girls. It was the summer of Chandra Levy disappearing from Washington, D.C., her lover, a congressman, evasive and blow-dried from Modesto, the TV wandering in every room in America to an image of her tight jeans and piles of curls frozen in a studio pose. It was the summer the only woman known as a serial killer, a $10 whore trolling the plains of Central Florida, said she knew she would kill again. Murder filled her dreams, and if she walked in the world, it would crack her open with its awful wings. It was the summer that in Texas, another young woman killed her 5 children, left with too many little boys, always pregnant. One Thanksgiving, she tried to slash her own throat. That summer, the congressman lied again about the nature of his relations, or, as he said, he couldn't remember if they had sex that last night he saw her. But there were many anonymous girls that summer, there always are, who lower their necks to the stone and pray, not to God, but to the Virgin, herself once a young girl, chosen in her room by an archangel. Instead of praying that summer, I watched television, reruns of a UFO series featuring a melancholic woman detective who had gotten cancer and was made sterile by aliens. I watched infomercials, exercise machines, pasta makers, and a product called Nails Again with henna. Ladies, make your nails steely strong naturally. And then the photograph of Chandra Levy would appear again below a bright red number, such as 81, to indicate the day she was missing. Her mother said, "Please understand how we're feeling," when told that the police don't believe she will be found alive, though they searched the parks and forests of the capital for the remains. And I remembered being caught in Tennessee, my tent filled with wind, lifting around me. "Tornado honey," said the operator when I called in fear. The highway barren, I drove to a truck stop where maybe 100 trucks hummed in pale even rows like eggs in a carton. Truckers paced in the dining room, fatigue in their beards and their bottomless cups of coffee. The store sold handcuffs, dirty magazines, T-shirts that read "ass, gas, or grass, nobody rides for free," and a bulletin board bore a public notice: Jane Doe found in a refrigerator box outside Johnson, Tennessee, with her slight measurements and weight. The photographs were of her face, not peaceful in death, and her tattoos, Born to Run and JT, caught in scrollworks of roses. One winter in Harvard Square, I wandered drunk, my arms full of still warm, stolen laundry, and a man said, "Come to my studio," and of course I went. For some girls, our bodies are not immortal so much as expendable. We have punished them or wearied from dragging them around for so long, and so we go, wearing the brilliant plumage of the possibly freed by death. Quick on the icy sidewalks, I felt thin and fleet, and the night made me feel unique in the eyes of the stranger. He told me he made sculptures of figure skaters, not of the women's bodies, but of the air that whipped around them, a study of negative space, which he said was the "where we were not" that made us. Dizzy from beer, I thought, why not step into that space? He locked the door behind me.
Holy cow.
Whoa, baby.
Thank you for sharing that.
Whoa, baby. What is the title of that?
Dangerous for Girls.
Dang,
Yeah.
girl.
So,
Wow.
what's it like to be published in the New Yorker?
Well, you know what? I'm still living in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
So it's real. It's real.
Things are still real.
You know,
yes.
speaking of Las Cruces, and I know we only got 1 minute, but both of you, through basketball in the barrio and living over in that neck of the woods, you know Beto O'Rourke. And I just wonder what your take is on him and his campaign to be president.
Knowing I just sent my first check to Elizabeth Warren.
Well, Beto has been, I don't know Beto well, but I've known
He's
him
in
for a
town
long
Monday
time.
night, too.
He's here in Chicago?
Yeah.
He's been great to basketball in the barrio, and so that's my only experience with him is he sends his kids, and they're often, there's 100 kids, and there might be 6 Anglo kids total, and his kids are always there. and he's come and supported basketball in the barrio. So I'm a fan of his. I wouldn't, there's other candidates that maybe I agree with him more on this or that, but I think he'd do well. I think he'd be better than the guy we have in office.
That's kind of where we all wind up at this table. We're basically for anybody.
But why not in the Senate where we might need him even more?
Well, and
Bingo.
and that was and he almost he ran a remarkable campaign. He's got tremendous energy.
Let's get him there. Let's get him there.
He's got great charisma. And I knew his father, Pat, died on a bicycle, which scares me because I'm on the bicycle all the time. But Pat was a really well-loved El Paso politician. And I think Beto has made some missteps many years ago that he often gets hammered for about eminent domain and that kind of thing in El Paso. But I think we'd have a hard time agreeing with everything that President Obama did, but I'd love to bring him back.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. So So I'm a Beto O'Rourke fan. I think he's very good, and he's not the only one in the Democratic field I'd be excited about.
What is the thing that Alma is looking most forward to doing here in Chicago this summer?
I'd say Yogurt Square, isn't it, Connie?
Build your own sundae.
All right. Live from the Heartland is very, very grateful for both of you and Christian Diaz, our three guests today who brought us the world in an hour's time. And now we're going to invite you all to tune in again next week. Thanks for everybody who makes this possible. Jake Levy, welcome home.
Yay, Jake.
And James Porter,
Yay,
right
James.
behind me doing camera. God love you. And Lynn, again, we say hello and see you soon, I hope.
We're going to have a little Jericho to take us out by Booker T.
Booker T and AMGs.
Yes, do good in the world. The world needs all the good
that
we
we
do.
All power to the people.